Trauma is an interesting thing. Trauma can shape who you are, it can shape who you become, it can have a role in your life that can never be filled by anything else. And today I wanted to talk about a character whose trauma never really got over, and a trauma that changed the course of his life forever. Of course, we're talking about One Piece and Gecko Moria. Kishi. So One Piece has an insane amount of characters, all from various different backgrounds, different life stories, and with all those characters, I don't think Gecko Moria is that popular. Even for One Piece villains, he's not that popular. And I don't know what it is with me and unpopular One Piece villains, because, Captain Kuro fan over here. But something about him has always drawn me to him. And granted, I used to think it was my bias because one, Brook is one of my favorite Straw Hats, and Brook's introduction arc has him as the main villain. But as I've looked at him and time has passed, I've come to realize I think I like him more than just, he's in the arc where one of my favorite Straw Hats are in. So a while back, Oda did kind of like this good timeline, bad timeline premise with the Straw Hats. The timeline in which they followed their dreams and the timeline in which they didn't. And he showed them all in their various ages in each of those timelines. So there was like a Nami at 20, 40, 60, and then there was a bad timeline Nami at like 20, 40, 60. And the running joke is that if you followed your dreams, you ended up being a better person or a better looking person because of it. And then I went back and looked at Moria's old photos, because there's not a lot of old photos or footage of him as a 20-something-year-old, but the photos and footage we do get, and considering the conversations that are had about Moria, that, he used to be on par with Kaido back in the day, made me come to an interesting conclusion, which is that we're in bad timeline Moria. Moria used to be like this thin dude who, although still looked devilish, like he was a certain type of way. I mean, the Moria we get in Thriller Bark is a fat, lazy, strategic slob who just so happens to be powerful and has a pretty good devil fruit. On top of which, back in the day, we don't get to see a lot of footage, or at least not a lot of canon footage of him and Kaido fighting. But we know based off of some of it that he probably fought more honestly and straightforward versus how he fights in Thriller Bark, which is very guerrilla warfare, tactical, where he'll hit and run or he'll never fight you directly. It isn't until the very end of the arc in which he fights you directly. And I always wondered, what was the fight with Kaido that bad? And then I realized something that is mentioned during the arc, where he goes, Luffy, you're gonna get destroyed by the New World. When I fought Kaido, I lost everything. See, I think Moria isn't necessarily characterized properly. People look at his design, and people look at his laugh, and people look at his just like general demeanor, but I don't think people look at the fact that Moria is actually a very caring individual. And the trauma from when he fought Kaido and he lost his entire crew because of it completely stuck with him, and I think still sticks with him. He even explains at the end of the arc of Thriller Bark that the reason why he even has a zombie crew in the first place is because he lost everything when he fought Kaido. And he's like, I'm not going through that again. And the reason why I lost in the first place is because I had subordinates that could die in the first place. And I think he thought at the time that his issue was like that emotional connection, and the trauma that came from that event forced him to go, I don't need emotional connections. I can do everything on my own. As long as I have an undead army, I'll never have to lose anyone again. And then he immediately contradicts himself years later when he goes into enemy territory. He goes by himself into Blackbeard's territory to rescue one man. Honestly, Absalom's not even like an interesting or popular character, and he still risked it all just to go save him, and ends up getting captured because of it. And as genuinely seems angry and frustrated when he finds out that, your devil fruit's been stolen, and aka you might be dead, but it's One Piece, so we take the dead thing with a grain of salt. Moria cares about his crew. He still cares about his crew, and I think that love is shown in return, at least for certain characters, Perona being the best example of it. But Moria couldn't handle that loss for anything, and it shaped him terribly. He refused to fight honorably anymore, which is why he fights with his shadow mostly. It's why he uses the doppelganger. He does a lot of AoE or like distance ranged attacks. He has swords. We see him with a sword in the flashback, and he uses scissors like swords later on in the current timeline. But Moria is not a honorable fighter anymore, and I think part of that's also because he feels like it didn't really get him anywhere. And it's funny because he predestined Luffy's downfall anyway. Remember, he says, oh, you're gonna get nailed down, you're gonna get destroyed in New World. The irony being is that he was even more right than what he said he was, because the Strides got annihilated literally the next main arc. Moria is a character who consistently suffers and I think gets undermined. And one of the biggest things I wish was in the series is that we got to see Moria help Luffy beat Kaido. I felt like Moria needed that catharsis, because I think it's been like a lingering shadow, no pun intended, over him ever since he lost. Remember, the reason why he even created his zombie army was because of Kaido. And the sole purpose originally was to build an army that could take down Kaido. Kaido has been living rent-free in Moria's mind for like over a decade. And then the irony being is that you didn't even get to beat him. You can't even save your friend. That's a character I don't think gets enough love and attention and positive response in the community. That he's a character who openly has struggled and never really got over the trauma that was created through losing a fight and losing everyone surrounded. It's funny that one of the most popular One Piece movies is literally the same premise. Movie 6 is literally dealing with a pirate who lost his entire crew and then fed souls of other pirates to a demon flower to create the illusion that his friends were still alive. It's dealing with a character who's grief-ridden over the deaths of his friends and completely changes as a person because of it. Moria being in the same exact boat. And even as he changed, even as he created this more lazy, dishonorable persona, he still formed bonds and connections with the crew members he did have to further his goals. And he still cares about them just as much as he did his old crew. To the point where, just like Luffy would, he ran into enemy territory by himself to save one crew member. I guess the only thing that Moria didn't really have that Luffy had was the devil's luck, which is ironic for someone who has a devil fruit and a devilish appearance. I don't think he gets enough credit. I don't think he gets enough love and attention. And I think his laugh is like one of my favorite One Piece laughs in the series. But that's just something to say note of, that trauma can completely shape you for who you are, but it doesn't necessarily get rid of who you are as a core. And Moria has a lot of problems and isn't inherently a good person, but the one thing you can say is that he is incredibly loyal to the people he cares about, and that's got to count for something, right?